Chapter 1, Introduction. Now, that's a bit of a misnomer. I call it introduction. It's actually how to launch teams. It maybe should be called team launch. I call it intro so people don't get too surprised. They look at the agenda or the syllabus of the class and they know what to expect or think they do for an introduction. But actually what we do is self-organize and launch teams, and they learn how to do it and they do it themselves. It might be the most important part of the class. This book is our launch pad to reach the rapidly growing new world of modern business agility. Here we will present the Scrum Master program fully and completely, sharing how to achieve the business values included in Scrum. The intention is to give you the principles that make it work broadly and to offer specific applications that solve recurring problems in specific domains. Principles work everywhere. Applications are context specific. So this book has principles that if you get those, you can apply this stuff anywhere, any context. Principles apply broadly, even universally, potentially. Application are still super useful because if you have the context where that application fits, you can apply this pattern immediately as a practiced reflex. So there's value there too. So this book presents both application and principle. People that only know application can never work cross-domain or in a new domain. People who only know principle can create any application they need, but it may take time. So having a recipe book of application even helps people who are skillful or even masterful at principle. On completion of this book, you, as a dedicated reader, will be able to obtain the business values of Scrum in your studies, your personal goals, your personal work, and your business. I think this is important, and I learned this working with Riccardo Meriti. He would always stress Scrum is successful in business. In fact, it's the only thing that works in business, the principles of it, whatever you call it. But you can and should use it for your studies, your personal life, your relations. And Maria Mattarelli and Peter Stevens wrote a book about that called Personal Agility, and that book is awesome. I use it myself. I highly recommend it. In addition, a dedicated reader should be able to teach a top-tier Scrum Master seminar, provided they earn and maintain the appropriate credential, whichever credentialing body you want to use, anywhere they choose in the world. Combined, the authors of this book have trained more than 10,000 Scrum Masters in Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia, and North and South America. Now, those are mostly my students, but Riccardo Meriti has also contributed to this book, and he's also trained some students. In language-specific adaptations of this book, like the Spanish version of the book, the French version, the Mandarin, the Japanese version, other trainers have contributed, and they've also trained even more people. The authors of this book have achieved many of their own academic and personal goals, working goals, financial goals, and more broadly, business goals. Why should you consider trusting this book and its authors? Fair question. I'll give you my best answer. This book is created by the Agile Business Institute, with the primary contributor being Joe Justice, chair of the board of the Agile Business Institute. The Agile Business Institute has amassed more than 100 years combined experience in executive-led agile transformations of global Fortune 50 companies. So we've got that going for us. Joe Justice has been featured in CNN Money, Forbes, the Harvard Business Review, TED.com, the Discovery Channel, ABC's Good Morning America, NBC's Today Show, Fox News. In Asia, the Asahi Shimbun and the Nikkei, which are the two top publications in Asia for business, among other global publications. Joe Justice's experience includes agile transformation work, training, consulting, and presenting in Lockheed Martin, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, where I was Scrum Master for Bill Gates, Boeing, the US Air Force, Hewlett Packard, including Xerox PARC and the founders of Xerox PARC, Tesla, where I was head of Agile at Tesla for Elon Musk. And then had visits to SpaceX during that time too. There's a lot of cross interaction between Tesla and SpaceX. Toyota, where I trained the next CEO of Toyota, Daisuke Toyota. I was the certified Scrum trainer for Daisuke. MIT and MIT Sloan Business School. Siemens, Pictet Bank, which is the largest privately owned bank in the world, and more than 100 others. So please consider trusting me. These brands, these companies, these news outlets have decided to trust me. Please consider trusting me. The Agile Business Institute has full-time operations in all the most densely populated time zones, truly covering the world of work. The ultimate goal of the Agile Business Institute is to produce a globally powerful Master of Business Agility degree, a modern MBA. Having guest lectured at MIT Sloan Business School, Harvard Business School, that was Ricardo Meriti, one of the other contributing authors, not me. I haven't yet anyway. University of California at Berkeley, that was me. Carnegie Mellon, Oxford University in England, industrial design and fashion schools globally, such as l'IFM École de Mode, IFM in Paris, Universitat de Barcelona, and Parsons Fashion and Art Design School in New York City, and others. We have observed contemporary business degrees offer courses on business agility, but still also teach outmoded models of dehumanizing and frankly ineffective management, like Sloan silos, where a company is divided by skills groups. And I'll try to address in this book why that's a really poor idea if you're interested in speed, innovation, and employee engagement or employee happiness, or even just money, like just frankly effective business. It must be so tempting to believe that business students can learn a rote set of spreadsheet formulas that arm them to sweep out the old management team and create dramatically superior, sustained shareholder performance. Rote formulas would do nothing to repeatedly create products that improve what is possible with a high morale employee base. It doesn't work. Rote formulas don't create engagement and fit evolving business scenarios. That is as true as an axiom. And yet it's commonly held by business schools that if you study these case studies and derive from them rote patterns of management, you can then go out and rescue any company. And that does not have a track record of success. For a track record of success, we would need an entirely new framework that's not a rote set of rules, but a self-reinforcing framework that creates a dynamic, an agile business. How to read this book. Immersive learning is a superpower we can all access. And one way this is done is in a seminar. In this book, we want to give you a feel for the seminar experience as you go along, gaining a sense of inclusion during our time together. Findings about the physiology and neuroscience of learning suggests that active focus for set blocks of time with breaks between them enhances learning experience. When reading this book, please treat it the same as you would attendance in one of our classes. Get up and get moving at least every 90 minutes if you can. Take a 15-minute break every 45 minutes to walk, stretch, get a coffee or water, and most importantly, get fresh air. Research by Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory and SUNY Upstate Medical University, New York, show that air in a conference room or single room becomes so oxygen poor after just one short meeting that our brain function is impacted more than some drugs, with performance dropping from 44 to 94% when CO2 levels crossed 2,500 parts per million. A Harvard and SUNY study later backed up those findings. I'll try to translate that. Basically, if you're in a conference room for more than 45 minutes and you haven't opened the door, it's even worse if there's more than one person, but an average size conference room. Your judgment and critical thinking capability becomes as impaired as if you've had 2 to 4 beers. No wonder the meeting culture, at least pre-COVID, pre-remote work revolution, made a lot of really unhappy, slow, disengaged businesses. And I'm not saying knock down every wall and go open floor plan only, but at least open the door or keep meetings under 45 minutes. If practical, please attempt to read this book in 2 days. I know that's a stretch. This book, depending on the translation, is about 250 pages. But if you could do it in 2 8-hour chunks, depending on your reading speed, that would match the rhythm we've created in the live courses, the most popular version of the live courses. And that works really well. So if you can, I invite you to try to read the book in 2 days. A recommended and aggressive goal would be chapter 1 through 10, the first half of the book across a full day. Your target, not counting break time, would be to try to do that in 8 hours. And that depends on your reading speed. And I encourage you to stop and take notes. That's the advantage of a book. Treat this day as an immersive class with 4 to 8 hours dedicated to this first approximately 100 pages. Then perform the brief homework just before going to sleep on night 1 at the end of chapter 10, the first half of the book. The morning on day 2, your brain will have had the opportunity to generate new synapses and synaptic connections with which allow us to develop new patterns of thinking and new habits. This is in fact required to accomplish a change in mindset, should you decide for that to be something you're interested in exploring. The cool thing about the way the brain grows, as far as we think we know, as far as I think I've learned working with some neuroscientists and neuroscience researchers, is you have to choose to think a given way. It is a choice. And then that encourages synapses to fire along those paths of thinking. And the more those synapses fire along any given path, the stronger they become. They grow closer together, they grow connections, and then they grow a sheath, a myelin sheath. And that sheath allows the synapses to use less energy to fire. So of course they fire even more often along those paths and less often along other paths. This is, as far as we know, what makes a habit, a mindset, or a culture. It's this, and you can actually choose it. This book is built to give us some options of how we want to think if you choose to. So again, that's the cool thing. You absolutely, research suggests we have free will. So if you think, I would like to make this habit, and if, for this book's case, some Scrum habits, some agile business habits, doing the homework just before sleeping after reading the first half of the book gives us a very high likelihood of building those synaptic chains to create the models of thinking, the mindset of thinking that's proposed in this book, which I will call an agile mindset. And I really think we got it right. So I'll encourage you to try to open up the possibility in your brain that maybe some new habits are a good idea. Please consider it. The morning on day 2, your brain will have had the opportunity to generate new synapses and new synaptic connections, which allow us to develop new patterns of thinking and new habits. This is in fact required to accomplish a change in mindset, should you decide for that to be something you're interested in exploring. Day 2, please read the second half of the book, chapter 11 through 20, concluding with your certification. We are not able to grant a certification from the Scrum Alliance without working directly with you and your group in a specific classroom format, either online or face-to-face. So I can't give you a credential just from the book. However, you will have earned the equivalent knowledge. So if you aren't too concerned about the credential, you will have had the information. And we look forward to certifying you in person, should that be of interest to you, when you come to our seminars armed with your best questions. So really, if you're not yet a certified Scrum Master by any of the certification groups, this book is exactly the information you'd want. Then if you do want certification, certification will allow you to go deep on the topics of interest in that live session with your instructor or instructors, and you'll already have your best questions. So you can engage with the other attendees and with the instructor with your best questions. Now you know all about us and our dreams and the structure of this book. We want to know more about you. 1, what company do you work in, or are you seeking new opportunities? 2, how do you measure your own business success? 3, does your organization measure business success as currency in dollars or another global exchange, Doge, Bitcoin, Euro, Yen, or in impact, the way a nonprofit might? 4, what do you think might be the strongest business value of good Scrum or good business agility in an organization? 5, what is your role in the organization? 6, what 2 or 3 skills or more do you do well professionally at work? It turns out we are all cross-functional, multi-skilled people, but some of us have not yet explained our breadth of skills to most of our colleagues or business partners. So here's a chance. What else do you do well at work? 7, how long have you been using Scrum or Agile business methods? Or are you new to Scrum or Agile business methods? In the course, our live seminars, we discuss this with a group in a particular game. It helps us get to know each other, and a lot of people become friends. Some people start new companies together from taking our class together. In this book, I'll invite you to post any of those answers to any of the authors or any of the members of the Agile Business Institute. We are on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and email, or your preferred method. For example, you can email me, joe@justice.fit. I have a whole bunch of emails, but that one works fine. And it's not tied to any given company or organization. It's just for me. The email for the Agile Business Institute is team@agilebusinessinstitute.org. We also do info@abi-agile.com. That one might be even better. We check both. In a classroom setting, we would ask you to get up and introduce yourself standing. That actually makes a difference psychologically and energetically, to 3 or 4 other people across the room. So you actually have to walk. And ask them each of these questions in turn, and then sharing your own answers. When you are beginning self-organization of teams, we recommend you do the same. This creates a very different energy. Especially when you ask people these questions, instead of saying your answers first, you've walked across the room, and so have they. You've crossed paths with different people, and you land with a almost random group of 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 people. And then someone gets brave enough to ask these questions from each other. It creates a very open-minded, fairly positive modality. And I do that when I launch teams live in person. So I've written in the book exactly how I do it. And you can mimic it, even reading the book, by sending an email or a tweet or a Facebook post or a LinkedIn post to me or any of the contributing authors or members of the Agile Business Institute. You are invited to attend an upcoming course yourself and become certified as a Scrum Master if you want to see and do this live. We'd love to have you. You can see our current course postings at www.agilebusinessinstitute.org, also www.abi-agile.com. We have classes in Asia, Europe time zones, America's time zones. Love to work with you. Next, we would wish to take a class photo. for all of us to remember the start of our 2-day Scrum Master journey together. In Zoom, we do a Zoom capture for our online courses, or depending which online tools we use. I'd really like to use Gather or Remo. I haven't yet for a class. I may by the time you listen to this part of the recording. Please consider, book reader, taking a selfie now or using your work profile picture and sending it to us. I'd love to know who's reading the book, and maybe we can become friends. I'd love it. If you're brave that way, I'd love it. This might help us create some of the network and camaraderie and mutual support that comes from a classroom session together, even delivered through this book. If you don't mind, please give it a try. In the classroom, we ask participants to form a single file line in order of experience with Scrum or Agile business methods. This might feel a bit intimidating, but there are some very useful reasons for us instructors doing that. So if you're reading this book as an instructor, I want you to understand why, as an instructor, I choose this tool. If you're reading this book as someone learning Scrum, maybe new to Scrum or sharpening your Scrum skill, maybe appreciating why this exercise is done, the line exercise, will give you a deeper understanding of how to execute agility for higher business performance by creating the right culture or mood or mindset. Please allow me to try to explain. First reason for having the line exercise, standing in order of Agile experience, or in our online class, we vote with our fingers and you can see everyone's fingers. First, we are physically standing up for Scrum or Agile business methods. And psychologically, that actually does something useful. It reduces the amount of heckling, or sometimes people are sent to an Agile class or Scrum Master class, and they'll sit like this, and they want to say to the instructor what's not good about the session or why this won't work. That's fine. We want to welcome those people, but we don't want them to distract from the learning speed and depth and immersion and positive mood for everybody. Having this line exercise and having everyone stand up, it's much less likely that someone can adopt this posture. It can still happen, but it's much less likely. It breaks that posture. And they start to see potentially people they respect that are far down the line that have a lot of experience. And sometimes they notice they never thought this could work, but there's people that have less experience even than them. And it starts to open up the mind. And doing this standing up psychologically and energetically makes the mood less heckling, less dangerous for distraction. And okay. Which in some ways shows an interest as a pledge of sorts to be interested in it earnestly, in Agile methods earnestly, at least for the 2 days of the training. Second, this physical act reduces the likelihood of a student slouching in their seat and acting as a know-it-all and making sniping comments that could slow down or derail the course. That effect is partly due to the straight spine most of us adopt when standing up in a single file line to have our picture taken. Yeah, the other thing is we're going to take the picture when they're standing. So people pose, and that good posture honestly boosts energy. It unlocks, like calorically, I don't mean only metaphysically, like calorically, you start to burn more calories when you lock and space out your spine like that. Also makes it easier to breathe deeply and oxygenate our blood. This effect is partly due to the straight spine most of us adopt when standing up in a single file line to have our picture taken. Through this technique, the slouching posture of a snide commenter is disrupted early in the course. In addition, seeing where we all are in a continuum of learning more experience with Scrum creates a public value for Scrum experience that overrides a frustrated or tired student's possible urge to devalue Scrum publicly. Here's what I mean. They might see someone they really respect, maybe, that has a lot of experience with agile methods or Scrum. And that starts to associate value. I respect this person's business skill and I respect how they spend their time. They don't spend their time on things that are flippant, useless, or unhelpful. And they've been doing Scrum for 8 years. Okay, maybe there is something to this Scrum stuff. It creates a currency or an implied value, potentially. In any event, after the students have formed a single file line in relative order of Scrum experience, our instructors will ask students to raise their hands if they have less than 1 year of experience with Scrum and reorder the line. We want to actually show that correctness has value is the point here. Otherwise, people may be sloppy all through the class and might miss some of the learning opportunities. So early in the class, and it only takes a few extra minutes, maybe 2 extra minutes if we're quick, we actually firmly rank the line by order of experience. So please raise your hand if you have less than 1 year. And sometimes there's one person in the middle of the line with their hand. And maybe we try to get the group to laugh and I'll say, well, how did you get there? Or I'll read the room to try to see what would be upbuilding. But then we reorganize the room. Full forgiveness, nothing shameful, keep it positive. And then raise your hand if you have more than 1 year of experience and shuffle again. Maybe someone at the beginning end of the line had a year of experience and they were in the wrong order. Raise your hand if you have 2 years of experience, move around and go all the way through, firm stack rank the line. Yeah, it takes a small amount of time. It shows correctness matters in this class or correctness is honored in this class. People start to respond the way they're noticed. So they'll start to respond more correctly, has been my experience doing this. And reorder the line. This repeats by increasing the increment of time and asking attendees to reorder themselves until we all know how long the most experienced person in the room has been attempting effective Scrum. And we all know about the range of experience in the room. This allows the class from this point on to be tailored to beginners, intermediate, or advanced Scrum application to best match who actually showed up in the class this time. I have had classes where it was all people who've been doing Scrum more than 5 years, and some people who'd been doing it more than 14 years, deeply, deeply, deeply experienced people. So I knew I should change the way I teach the class from that point on. And I've had classes where every single person had 0 experience and didn't know what Scrum was. That was super useful for me to recognize right from the onset of the class. I could teach everything in a different way to try to make it better match who I had to work with. So as an instructor, I find huge value in this step. Also, it lets you know if there's a real mix. And then I will ask everyone, please notice we have some people that are brand new and some people that are deeply experienced. Please be patient if a question is asked that's not at your level. So I ask for support right from the beginning. And that does help people become more interested, even when a question doesn't match. And it allows people to create more time, even for 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes of conversation on a question that's not at their level, because they understand the mix of the room. It lets the instructor learn a lot more. Sometimes a student is far more experienced than some of the instructors, and making this visible early allows the instructors to teach effectively what they do know, while building in time for them to learn as much as they can too. I've had students that were more skillful than me. And so I asked them in front of the room, please update me when you see an opportunity for me to improve an area or learn something better. I'm honored you're here. Thank you so much. And if you do learn something from me, I'm grateful, but I'll do my best to teach what I do know. And I'll actually ask them to help me teach the class. I try not to put them on the spot and make them feel uncomfortable, but I will ask them to, at least in their team, because we're about to form teams, teach, and not without letting the people in the room work at it first. The rule I'll propose if we have experienced people at each team is let your group talk it through first, whatever the topic, whatever the challenges they're working on in teamwork. But if they're stuck for more than 60 seconds, rescue them for the experienced people. Don't let your team be frustrated for more than 60 seconds is what I present to them. Self-organization. Here's the team launch. Now we've made visible the range of experience in the room, right? So this is how I actually do team launch. I do that in real companies, and then we do team launch. The first step of it, well, second, is self-organization. The next step is to practice a team launch, as similar as practical to a real company during agile restructuring. We ask attendees to self-organize into a group of 4 to 6 people. And the reason for that is communication pathways, which we'll cover later in the book. And we request they join a group of all people they do not know, with an equal distribution of experience with Scrum across all teams that will form. So each team, I hope, has someone who's brand new to Scrum, depending on who attended this class, someone who's very experienced in Scrum, and I hope they all don't know each other. That way they don't have any preconceptions about how other people think they need to act. I'll talk about that more later in the book. Psychologically, it's very powerful to learn something new in a group of people you don't know. We also ask that each team have a gender split representative of the gender split of the attendees in the seminar. So if we have a perfectly even gender split, I would request that each team have an even gender split. Being on a team with all people we don't know gives us the option to reinvent ourselves. No one on the team knows our strengths or our weaknesses yet. This frees us from routine, preconception, and habit, allowing ourselves to play a new role as an even more capable person and professional. Since we are aiming to actually build new synapses tonight and myelinate them, create that myelin sheath, like we do every time we learn something new, or better yet, create a better serving habit, we are best served by surrounding ourselves with people who do not yet have any preconceptions of us. This step, like all parts of an agile transformation and an agile project and this Scrum Master seminar, is conducted using test-driven development. The test is given to all attendees in as clear and brief a way as practical. And the next part of the work begins once the test is observed to have been passed. The test is, all students are sitting down at a new table with their belongings in a group of 4 to 6 people they don't know, with a gender split similar to the gender split of the attending students, and the relative Scrum experience in the room is distributed approximately equally across all teams. In Zoom, we ask that they do the same, but instead of sitting at a table, they've manually themselves chosen a breakout room with these people. So we turn on the setting, attendees can choose their own breakout room. I haven't yet tried this in Remo or Gather, but I think it might be even more powerful. Those are fantastic online tools, the best I can tell. One fast way to accomplish some of this is to have the students, while still standing in order of experience with Scrum from the class photo, count off by the number of class attendees divided by 4, placing them each in a team of 4 people. While this works fine, commanding the students do this early in the class creates a mood where students are simply waiting for direction, which is not the alive and vivacious spirit of fast teams capable and interested in autonomously solving their own problems. So I have had classes where I said, count off by 4, that's your team number, sit down. I did that for time reasons. Maybe we started late. One class had a fire drill. Another class, there was a very good but lengthy introduction by the company sponsor. We didn't have much time, but it does change the mood of the class. And what I want as an instructor is, as early in the class as possible, teams start acting like they're hungry for surprise problems. And with high trust with each other, they're going to, in a positive way, attack a new challenge, because that's what I see in the fastest companies I've ever had a chance to visit. And they have this very rapid pace of innovation as a result. That can happen at the start of a class sometimes, especially if I don't use command and control language, like saying count off by 4. Sometimes people, you can really see them like come alive. And sometimes it's just one person and they become a little bit ostracized. So I try to help them and amplify them. But sometimes it's the whole class. They light up and they look like some of the fastest companies I've ever been in at the start of the class. Now, you know, that's going to be a good class from that point on when that happens. Some of those classes are classes where people after the class or even during the class have created startups together, some of which I've invested in. I mean, they just quit their jobs and made new companies on the spot because they said, we've got it. We know what to do now. It's really cool. Oh, okay, back to the book. As an instructor, we recommend trying to read the room. The goal is to determine if letting the students fumble a bit, but ultimately self-organize into teams, will be seen by students long-term as their own accomplishment or just frustration. By the way, this will also reveal the culture in which the people in the room are used to working. For example, in some seminars, a manager type will simply start pointing at people and telling them which team to go in. And even worse, some attendees will immediately follow these commands without even being surprised. This early reveal of an entrenched command and control culture will let you know your course and how you'll need to adapt it to provide even more hands-on exercise, for example, on the benefits of autonomous teams that make their own decisions. And you'll likely need to use financial success terms to justify team autonomy. Otherwise, a command and control company won't have any interest. Why would they want autonomy? So you'll need to use examples on why and how it makes more money. Luckily, there's a lot of good case studies on that, and I'll be sharing many of those in this book. This is because command and control organizations are often driven by commercial metrics above all else, likely as a result of a leadership culture selected over time from metrics-based MBA programs, which preach Sloan silos or skills-based silos, and treating people as resources to be commanded. Interestingly, those same organizations typically have the lowest process efficiency when faced with quick change, and therefore stand to gain the greatest business advantage relative to where they were if they can foster self-organization and empowered teams in their company. You really are doing the good work here and will help these companies a tremendous amount. Now the test is passed. Everyone is sitting in a group of 4 to 6 people. They are then asked to create a Scrum board or Kanban board. That's just Japanese for sign board, as shown. Here, I'll try to share my screen. Bam. Maybe I should do this the whole time. So here's a graphic, and later versions of the book, I hope to make a new graphic. So you might have a book with an updated graphic. I hope so, but I hope it still fits. And you can see what the version 1 graphic of the book is here, which I drew in Mac Keynote. Now the steps 1 through 4, so you can see step 1, 2, 3, 4, to guide the attendees through filling in the sheet, including choosing an aspirational team name, which should be fun. Sometimes the teams will laugh already. Choosing someone to begin playing the product owner role, even if they don't know what it is, that's fine. That's why they're in class, we'll help them. And someone else to begin playing the Scrum Master role. And the balance of the team to begin playing the developer roles. And then writing the 5-column headers. And finally, filling in sticky notes or virtual sticky notes of specific pain points or questions that attendees wish to accomplish during the seminar. You can also see there's 2 languages on this image. almost every class the Agile Business Institute does is presented in at least 2 languages simultaneously. We have an interpreter co-instructor or more than one, and we have multi-languages for all written materials. And we do sequential translation. There's something called parallel translation where the instructor is talking, but you don't hear them. You have a headset on and you hear the translator. The problem with that is the instructor might really try to enunciate a specific point, but the translation just comes like this the whole time. There's no inflection at all. And students get bored, they check out. You see their eyes glaze over, they miss key points of focus. So instead, hearing the instructor say what the intonation is, and then asking the translator co-instructor, to try to use similar enunciation. It keeps people awake and it stresses the important parts. So highly recommended. And our classes are very global. So they're almost all at least dual language. Possibly without knowing it, your class has just conducted team launches at scale. You've just launched multiple teams at once. They have just self-organized into teams, created an information radiator, their Kanban board, of what they want to get done in a standard format all attendees can understand or will be comfortable with by the end of our Scrum Master seminar. And they've made visible who is currently playing which role so that teams can interact with each other as scaling patterns to coordinate across multiple teams are introduced to the class. You have done it. With this structure, the class can already self-organize up to hundreds of students. The largest class Joe Justice has taught as of this writing was 250 students, with only Joe Justice as the instructor. There were no co-facilitators. It actually worked really easily. It was almost effortless. It was really fun. And the course got very high reviews, got top marks. Establishing this team launch first allows the course to self-regulate, as we will see in the sections on group Scrum or group Agile. It's Joe's belief this system can allow for a single simultaneous class of any size, provided all attendees can clearly see and hear the instructor and their immediate team members, which is accomplished with large screens and clear powered audio or online tools such as Zoom. The principle here is, if we get the structure right, the scaling is painless, up and down at any time. By scaling, I mean multiple teams working together. If the structure is correct, if the ground rules are correct, you can add teams, subtract teams, buy a company, sell a company, and it's painless as far as the communication and getting work done and prioritizing work and removing impediments is concerned. And I hope you see that as the class goes on. It's probably easier to see in a live class than the book, but there's case studies in the book. I hope it helps. It may be useful to mention a contingency here. Joe likes to ask the class, what happens if someone comes into class late? Joe then fishes for the answer. I ask people and I fish, and when I find it, I try to amplify their answer. Along with the team, Joe fishes for the answer. And the answer is that the Scrum Master will welcome that person, help them find a team of people they don't know. And then the Scrum Master of that team will do their best, along with all the team members of that team, to catch up the new person and make them feel at home and welcomed. This is the same pattern used anytime a new resource is made available in the organization. And by resource, I don't mean to say human resource. Yeah, you could say human resource. I don't mean to be dehumanizing, but I use resource here intentionally because it could be a new machine. It could be a new virtual machine. It could be a new material. It could be a new software license. Whatever the resource is, a Scrum Master, whoever sees it first, their job is to shop that resource around to the available teams to try to find a home. And when they do, the Scrum Master of the receiving team, it's their job to work with the team to make best use of that resource or that person. And if it's a person, make them feel welcomed. And with this ground rule established, the course begins to regulate itself, even in this not unlikely scenario. As all three roles of Scrum are better and better understood, the class is soon able to self-regulate across many types of interruptions, aberrations, and even some catastrophes. I was in a high rise in New York City and the fire alarm went off, and it was not long after 9/11. And we were on the 40-something floor, if I remember, and the elevators immediately locked and strobe lights went on and the evacuate the building order came in. We were, I think, on day 2, just before lunch, maybe on day 2. The Scrum Masters of the teams worked with the product owners of the teams because it was their habit. I mean, they'd been doing it for a few hours already to self-regulate how we'd evacuate the building. And later the all clear was given. They self-regulated as teams how to get back up into the room. I gave no instruction as the instructor. I didn't need to. And it's true in real companies, more budget becomes available or a key client cancels, the teams self-regulate, they solve their own problems. This is how the organizations become self-managing or more flat. And by that, I really mean fast. It comes from good ground rules, which you're seeing how they're established for the first time here in the team launch section of the book. Meta Scrum. Next, our first scaling pattern, Meta Scrum. It's really sprint planning and product backlog refinement repeated. I may rename this to be group product backlog refinement and group sprint planning. But for now, I will use the published Meta Scrum pattern name, which is awesome. But I'm using it very specifically here, so I may rename it. Our first scaling pattern, Meta Scrum. Here we will use the Meta Scrum pattern as written by Jim Coplian et al. With additions by Joe Justice. So with the with additions part, maybe I should use a different name. It's significantly more focused. In the book, A Scrum Book, Jim Coplian et al. Writes, create a Meta Scrum as a forum where the entire enterprise can align behind the product owners, POs, backlogs at every level of Scrum in the organization. Okay, so that is also what I'm trying to do here. So this does meet the definition. Here is how we will facilitate it, including the addition Joe Justice applies in the field. The instructor will place sticky notes on a wall where everyone can see. In virtual classes, it's on a virtual whiteboard, and I share the screen so everyone can see. A virtual wall works fine for a virtual class. If there are 11 teams in the seminar, there should be 11 or more sticky notes so that each team may select their own sticky note. Each sticky note will have a business goal that is achievable with effective Scrum, written across it in large font, readable from the back of the room. So these are big Post-it notes, and I'm using a thick chisel tip Sharpie marker. For example, Meta Scrum for commercial firms. Increase return on capital. That could be a goal. How do we as a company increase return on capital? Another goal could be increase compliance, faster development, reduce defects, win more investment, excite customers, win more customers, enter new markets, meet OKRs and key KPIs, key progress indicators. To extract this, whatever the goals of a company are, those get put on Post-it notes and teams pull them. So this is how known goals are distributed across workforce. Now, I do now add a gold card and I write your idea on it. And anyone can pull this. In fact, they can create copies of the gold card. So everyone could create a gold card if they wanted to. And they can pitch back to leadership, if there even is leadership, maybe it's just each other, their idea. And if either the group or leadership, if there is leadership, accept the gold card as more valuable than the proposed initial goals, the gold card replaces the lowest value initially proposed goal, or at least the initially proposed goal is put further down to be pulled later after the gold card is finished. So this is how you get bottom-up innovation. And we'll talk about that more later in the book. We'll do that in the product owner course if we take that together. The teams are asked to send the person currently playing the product owner role up to the sticky notes, and the product owners are asked to discuss with each other which one goal they will choose as their team's release goal to be placed on their team's Scrum board. Team members are asked to quietly lobby their product owner for the release goal they are most interested in or most excited about. Anyone, through their product owner, may propose new goals provided they can convince a majority of product owners that their newly proposed goal is even higher business value than the already proposed goals. That's that gold card I talked about. In the event that a team does not reach consensus quickly, the product owner is empowered to ultimately decide the goal for their team. So the product owners go up to pull a card that their teams told them to pull. So the teams say, product owner, pull this one. And the teams are discussing with each other to try to achieve a team consensus. Product owner, okay, this one. And no, okay, sorry, we changed our mind, this one. And the product owner's job is to then be responsive to their team. The product owner is allowed to overrule their team, but only if there's good reason to do so. Otherwise, the team gets motivated by self-selecting. And if it truly isn't much superior for the product owner to overrule, they listen to their team and get that motivation boost in their team. In the event that a team does not reach consensus quickly, the product owner is empowered to ultimately decide the goal for their team. Deciding a release goal for your team is a delicate act, as it can damage a team's belief that they can make their own decisions. Teams that believe they cannot make their own decision are slower, as seen at the beginning of day 2 in chapter 11, Focus. However, a team that does not quickly have a shared goal fails the definition of a complex adaptive system, which will also prevent a team from quickly making decisions inside the team and cause the same slowness. So we don't want to wait until the team starts to act frustrated or energy goes down. If the team's energy is going down or they're getting frustrated, product owners just grab one. Then the team can succeed at this part of the definition of a complex adaptive system, which I'll explain later why statistically that's a really good idea to build into your company. The product owner's role here is to allow the team to discuss as long as it's fruitful, but not allow the team members to get frustrated or lose momentum. That's a common thread through all of Scrum, by the way, not just in Meta Scrum by the product owner. The release goal is chosen during Meta Scrum, must be explained to the teams. In our seminar, each release goal is a business goal. Teams are instructed that they will teach others through a poster each team will collaboratively create how to achieve their chosen written business goal by the end of the 2-day seminar. So for example, if a team chooses the goal in Metascrum in the class, enter new markets, they will in the class create a poster on how any company or an example company can more successfully enter new markets by using Scrum. That means they've mastered that concept. So it truly does become backlog for them. And they'll use that poster to teach the other teams in the room. And the other teams in the room will use their posters to teach them. And it reinforces learning. In this way, teams have now learned how to receive new business goals from management, if there is management. Again, if it's a flat company, the majority votes of the developers. And that's also fine. Companies like Valve in Seattle famously say they do this in their online employee handbook. And we see how to coordinate with other teams to get the goals to the teams that are best equipped to solve the problems. As teams are allowed to trade players anytime to best match skill and enthusiasm to the current goal, We now have a self-organizing system that iterates to self-maximize effectiveness of delivery and morale. So if a team gets a goal and they picked it, or maybe the product owner picked it because the team couldn't choose, fine. The teams then have an opportunity to trade players, and they can actually do this anytime, to get the best mix for that team. In minutes, like 3 minutes, you have arguably the optimum team mix for the goals you presented the room. This is so absurdly powerful for business. This is actually open space. What we're doing here is open space, and this goes well above what Scrum is. Scrum is just 3-5-3. It's a management structure. I'm actually teaching a complete agile business solution here. This isn't just Scrum. This is the best parts of open space management. And I did a lot of this at Tesla, which you can hear about in some of the podcasts I've been recording recently. We really could stop the class right here in the first 60 minutes, because you have the recipe. You have self-organizing teams pulling new goals from open space and self-managing to increase their efficacy. I mean, you've already won. But practicing Scrum for the rest of the class with hands-on examples and justifications will reinforce these points and make it easier to play the game of Scrum forever afterwards. It also will handle edge cases that can and do arise in the real world of work. And the Scrum Masters in the class that take the rest of the class will understand how to handle some not unlikely edge cases. After Meta Scrum, teams are shown the overall backlog of the course, everything we're going to do together. The Scrum Master of each team follows the instructor in creating a Sprint 1 burn down chart, which is absolutely necessary for creating future customer commitments or working with investors, as seen after lunchtime in Chapter 8, Estimate. Here's the entire course backlog, or it was at the time this book was first written. It's actually significantly different now. And here's the Sprint 1 burn down chart. In this example, we're an hour into a class that started at 10 a.m. and we finished introduction, which was worth 18 points in estimation. Now, we haven't done estimation yet as a class. We'll do that later. It looks like it's going to be after lunch at the current trend. So I asked the attendees to bear with me. Intro is worth 18 points. How and why it gets 18 points we'll do later in the section called estimate. But they see already a trend to what they're likely to gonna get done by lunchtime, depending on when the class started. Finally, the group Scrum board is drawn for the class, and I usually draw that as the facilitator. If I have an expert Scrum Master or coach in the class, I may ask them to draw it, or sometimes they volunteer. This board is maintained by the instructor, just as it would be maintained by the business owner, ultimately responsible for viability and impact of the business. This is similar to an Obeya room in the Toyota production system, a one-stop view of the best information currently available to make business decisions on the spot. For this practice to be effective, the best information must be present here, and the information must be current. Luckily, now that we have the Scrum framework in place across our teams, Scrum Masters are trained and responsible to provide management metrics that are incredibly brief, simple, and straightforward, making our group Scrum board fit on a standard whiteboard or virtual whiteboard. Because we have Scrum, we have teams with Scrum Masters on them. And because our Scrum Masters now have backlog and are making burn downs, we can burn down charts. We can so easily have them post updates to the group Scrum board, and there's no additional management overhead needed. It becomes a self-regulating, self-reporting, self-managing system. It's really beautiful. If any of you are software developers and have ever programmed a fractal and you run it and it doesn't crash, and the fractal repeats and repeats and repeats and repeats forever, like the Mandelbrot set, for example, it's a beautiful feeling for most of us. That's what we've just done here by establishing the correct algorithm. By getting the algorithm right, the fractal algorithm right, it scales effortlessly. And there's a lot of methods to handle more than one team at once that don't recurse. And the way to know that mathematically is, do you have the same rules and roles at every level? And none of the systems do currently, except Group Scrum or Group Agile that I'm using in this book. It's the only method where at every level, the roles and rules are identical. And that means it mathematically scales indefinitely. That's the definition of a fractal of any recursive system that doesn't have an end. So it's actually obvious mathematically, but sometimes common knowledge isn't common. The specific column headers will be introduced in the chapters titled Build, Estimate, and finally Focus. And in fact, there's a chapter title I want to add since this book was first written. It's called Help Request. It's the first column. And that's where a colorful post-it is put from any team asking for support from another team. Or if you have a leadership team or leadership teams, you're asking for help from them. Things like, we want to hire someone, or the machine's jammed, or none of us know how to do this particular type of algorithm. Does someone in another team know how? And you get this fast response across teams without waiting for another meeting. All of these are shortcuts to avoid wait states, so we have faster pace of innovation. In the live working environment in real businesses, the group Scrum board columns will be sprint numbers, with each team having their own row and the cells filled in by the teams themselves. So you don't have some master group that populates this. The teams themselves populate it. That lets you know, as someone facilitating agility across a company, which teams are not participating, because you can see their group Scrum board stops being updated. So you know to either coach that team or sell off that team, or if you have to, stop paying that team if it's really, really bad, because you can see who's engaged, who's participating. And at the level of efficiency they're engaged. When I worked in Tesla, we had machine learning measuring the financial efficiency of all teams. So all teams would see how much money was flowing through them and how efficiently that translated into value for the company. So for example, painting, for how much money was spent, how many paint defects were reduced, and by what degree of drasticness, and how much is that worth to the company? And that's all algorithms, machine learning, mostly Keras, TensorFlow. And you'd see it scroll up on your phone and on monitors. Then you could be self-managing because you have real-time efficiency data. So you didn't need like Elon coming down to say, make your team more financially efficient. You could see it yourself. So you create your own backlog. That's what self-managing means. Usually the Scrum Masters of each team fill in most of the cells for their team's row on the group Scrum board or group Agile board. But the team may choose any scribe. The group Scrum board is updated at least once per product release as part of the sprint review and demonstration of sprint team progress. Often they're updated daily or even every 45 minutes if the company's fast. What is actually filled in is that team's sprint goal and a yes/no as to whether the team showed the sprint goal met the definition of done before the set time for sprint review at the end of the sprint. So were paint defects reduced at an efficient use of funds? Yes or no? And the efficient use of funds is a metric. I mean, you can see it red or green, right? So that's not a weird question. It's a clear question. And yes or no, did it happen? That lets anyone judge the business impact, the business effectiveness of these teams. Do they need new goals? Do they need new training? Which teams are rock stars? Should we reward them? That kind of thing. This will be explained with examples in the chapter titled Demo and Retro near the end of our book as a brief and timely example. Sprint goals may be directionally correct improvements of KPI or OKR, or a product release or an agreement signed, or a money transfer completed, or a marketing campaign that's live now, or a customer mission accomplished, or a new customer signed, etc. Many people in classes ask what's an example of a sprint goal. And a lot of it's because they're in a really slow company and they're saying these projects are 3 years or 5 years. What's a sprint goal? Because a sprint's less than a month. So here's what a sprint goal is. I mean, eventually you're going to get really fast. And I'm not kidding. That entire 3 to 5 year project will fit in less than a month. It's magic when it happens. This book is going to show you how, if you haven't learned it already. Maybe you've already taken a class with me and you're just reading this book for review. But here are sprint goals that you can use to get started. You have a KPI or OKR, like defects found in field. A sprint goal could be reduce that. So what's something you can finish in less than a month that will reduce the number of defects found in field? Cool, right? That's a KPI or OKR that's really valuable to the business. Or a product release. We can release this product in less than a month. Okay, that's a good goal. Or an agreement signed, maybe from a regulatory compliance group. Can we get an agreement signed by our UL regulators that they'll accept this faster testing method? Let's try that in less than a month. We'll explain the business case, the validity, why the test tools are accurate. We can do that in a month. We can try to get the agreement signed. Or a money transfer is completed. We've gotten paid. That means this project is now successful. Or the marketing campaign is now live. I've been in many companies that had marketing sprints and they had campaigns built in less than a month and they were now live. Or a customer mission is accomplished. The customer says, we want to restructure our company for speed using agile methods. Okay, in less than a month, we will have a restructured organization as evidenced by where teams get their priorities, where teams report their impediments, and what those priorities and impediments are. And it won't be skills-based anymore. It'll be cross-functional project-based, and they'll finish something in less than a month. And we know if that's happened in less than a month, etc. That finishes chapter 1. I hope you're having a good time. Please tweet at me at any time. I'm at Joe Justice, and say, I was listening to your book or watching your recording of the book, and I thought this, and you can see this typo here, and it'd be much more clear if you wrote this a different way. I'll be super honest. I wrote this entire book in one take, and then I hired an awesome editor. But that editor's superpower wasn't splitting up my run-on sentences. They saved me from a lot of other problems. So I have all these run-on sentences, and it's hard to even read my own writing. I'm really excited for version 2 of the book, and that's why I'm recording this version 1, because it teaches me where it's difficult to read. And what I'll ask is for a team of people to please listen to this recording and then edit these chapters to split them into small sentences that are easy to read and fun to read. My goal is a high school student would enjoy reading this book and get the business value. So please tweet at me if you'd like to help edit and improve this book to be what it can be, to move it from this is version 1.19, all the way up to version 2.0, which would be a significant rewriting for smooth and fun reading. It should be like a Disney song. You get the idea, I hope, from the song, but it's fun and maybe rhythmic. Okay, that's the idea. I'll intend to do chapter 2 tomorrow. So in 20 days, we'll have this book recorded.